Residents and visitors to Kingston would be hard-pressed to travel through town without being reminded of our past. Whether it's historic homes, evidence of our shipbuilding and industrial past, or the meticulously carved grave markers of our forefathers, Kingston's history is everywhere. Charged with the important task of preserving, protecting, and developing the historical and archaeological assets of Kingston, our Historical Commission works diligently on matters impacting our historic resources. On today's episode of Good Day Kingston, we'll sit down with Craig Dalton, Ken Brack, and Tom Vendetti, 3 members of Kingston's Historical Commission, to learn more about their work, discuss their ongoing efforts in Kingston's old burial ground, and ask what the future holds for Kingston's Historical Commission. Craig, Ken, Tom, thank you so much for coming in today. I know everybody's got busy schedules, so I certainly appreciate you guys coming in to film an episode of Good Day Kingston with me. Can we just go around really quick and give you each the opportunity to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about how you got involved with the Historical Commission?
Sure. Okay, my name is Tom Vendetti, and I'm a retired teacher. I've always loved history, and I was involved in the 300th anniversary of First Parish Church in Kingston, and I was the chair of that committee. And the more I would dig into the history of the church, the more interesting it got. Turned out to be a lot of the history of the town. Craig, I guess, caught wind of some of the work I was doing, and he asked me if I'd be interested in serving. There was an opening, and I said sure. So I've, enjoyed working with Craig and the other members of the committee ever since.
I'm Ken Brack. I'm a writer and started getting involved with the town's history significantly in 2008 when we bought a historic house at 4 Elm Street that was in the Holmes family, one of the shipbuilding families for 5 generations, 1844, and from there just love to dig in from time to time to the shipbuilding heritage, if you will, and other things, and that led me to the commission in recent years.
Yep. I'm Craig Dalton, and I've been a member now for over 22 years with the committee. And I've always been interested in history, especially maritime history. And we only have to look at our town flag and town seal to see the maritime history involved with the brig Independence there, one of the first ships in the Massachusetts naval militia. I think when we first moved here over 35 years ago with my family, we were getting the Kingston Reporter. And that reporter then had a series in it about then and now. And people have talked about this on and off, and you see it occasionally in other papers. But it would take scenes, old postcards, old pictures from around town, and then they'd go there and take a picture of the current view from that area. And one day our house was on it. And that led to a lot of interesting conversations with people that used to live in the house and whatever. But that kind of really got me interested in Kingston history. And when I quit going to sea, I went to sea for 24 years, and when I quit going to ski, I had more time to spend, regular time that I could spend, continuous time, and give to the town. And when there was an opening on the Historical Commission, I applied for it, and I was appointed by the Selectman. So like I say, I think I'm the oldest serving member on the committee now, with 22 years.
So as chair, I feel like this might be an appropriate question for you, but why does Kingston have a Historical Commission?
Well, the Historical Commission is it's an interesting group. We're a 7-member commission. We are a non-paid commission, so we're very cheap. We have a budget which was cut last year or the year before by a little bit, and it's down to $250. I mean, it was cut like $20, so it wasn't a big cut. But it's very low cost to the town. All the historical commissions in the state, in the Commonwealth, are there to help preserve the historical and archaeological aspects of the town, to educate the public of the town about what the historical things we have in town are. That's by statute what we're supposed to do. And that was Chapter 40, Section 8D. And that was in 1973 that our town adopted or put into effect the Historical Commission at town meeting. The first, interestingly enough, the first chairman of the Historical Commission was John D. Funkhauser, and I don't know if the family's still around or not, but I don't hear that name very often. So some of the functions that we do for the town as a Historical Commission are protect the historical resources. We try to. We put in for grants to protect and develop the historical resources. We advise the town as projects coming up where the historical resources are so that we attempt not to destroy them. We also offer the town advice on how to reuse properties that are historical and to keep them in town but keep them actively used. We also review and comment on reports from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts when they have projects coming through town that might affect historical resources. Some are really no-brainers, and others are, you really have to think about it, because when we're digging up a lot of stuff in town here, there are a lot of archaeological resources around. So we comment on that, and we're the receivers of their reports as well when we're not contacted on some of the things. Another function that we have is to monitor the demolition delay bylaw in town and approve of immediate destruction or demolition of properties, or look for alternatives, seek alternatives to those to try to save historic properties in town. And we've had successes and we've had failures in that regard too. One other thing that we do is as a committee or commission is to research and create historical documentary inventory forms, which are on the state, and anybody in town can see those things going through the local history room, Kingston History Room Library. They have those forms online, and the State Mass Historical Commission website under MACRIS, M-A-C-R-I-S. You can look up, if your house is on a form, it's on there on the database, and you can access it on online. And without a historical commission, these things couldn't be done.
Now, is there a difference between a historical commission and a historic society, or historical society?
Yeah, there is, actually. There's quite a bit of difference, although typically most historical societies, like the Jones River Village Historical Society or the Kingston, the Duxbury Rural Historical Society, they're focused on historical stuff as well. But they're not established under a statute. They have no statutory powers. We're official agents of the municipality of Kingston, and they're not. We're responsible for historic preservation and planning in the town, and we have legal responsibilities. So a society doesn't do that. They're usually a nonprofit organization or private organization, and they have no responsibilities in town as far as protecting the other historic resources other than just what they're focused on. So it's quite a bit of difference. We actually, I think all three of us happen to belong to the Jones River Village Historical Society. We happen to. Many people do that, but there's really only one commission.
Now, this past year I went to the Shards and Chards event that you guys put on that was over at the Adams Center. I walked in knowing very little about the archaeological digs in town. I knew something about the Elm Street Dam and the role that played during the Industrial Revolution. But I walked out of there so excited about Kingston history, about the artifacts that had been found from Native American campsites, and one of the archaeologists talked about I think it was like a generator that they had unearthed when they were doing the dam removal. And you know, I know that I wasn't alone. The room was full of folks that walked out of there with this newfound respect and excitement about Kingston's history. So as three residents who clearly love Kingston and love Kingston's history, what's it like to sort of generate that spark with your neighbors and your friends in town and get them as excited about this as you are?
Well, I'm very interested in the old burying ground, and I have hosted walks through the burial ground. People don't go in there. I think most people don't even know it exists back there. And I'll describe where it's located later, or maybe you will, Ken. And you take them through and show them some of these beautiful monuments, tell them stories about the founders of our town and other important residents that are buried there. And they come out of there quite excited about history. And I learn more every month. I uncover more information. So it's just the best hobby I think a person can have.
I think maybe for me, a lot of the past is still with us, and that the cycles that we may go through, you know, in our life or as a society over, you know, centuries, in rediscovering that and repurposing it, and you know, and getting another handle on what we know, but also what we don't know, and what stories are still out there. And that speaks to, I think, what Tom just said with the old burial ground restoration preservation project, which we'll mention in a bit. But that's just an example. There's a lot out there still to be unearthed and to be discovered, and of course for the new generation. So I'm excited to be part of that.
I think too we should mention that talk and several before it have taken place at the Adams Center, which the town restored back to its beautiful interior and exterior. And without that, we wouldn't have that venue to present these things. And I do want to put a plug in for the Kingston Cultural Council, who helped fund some events last year and has granted funding for this year as well.
Now, that event was top-notch. I had a blast. It was just very informational. What other events do you guys have coming up, or what have you been involved in the past?
In this May, the whole first grade from Kingston Elementary School is coming over as part of, I think, a three-part visit to the town's historic resources or district, if you will. A walking tour for the kids. It will be split up in groups, and we met with one of the lead teachers recently. It sounds like a great day, so we'll be involved with helping to showcase some highlights of the old font school and the powder house next door to that, and then also the former training green, what we call the town common with the gazebo, and the burial ground.
Now, Tom, you mentioned the old burial ground. I know that that's a real passion project for you. What have you been doing over there? What are you working on, and what's coming up with the old burial ground?
Well, first let me tell you a little bit about the old burying ground.
And can you tell me, is there a distinction between a burying ground and a cemetery?
Oh, there is.
Okay.
An old burying ground basically would be a field where community members would be laid to rest. It was located on what was called an elevated plain. It's behind First Parish Church, with full view of the sea. And there would be no paths through there, no walkways would go through. There would be no vegetation of any kind, no plantings. If you take a walk through Evergreen Cemetery, for example, that's a cemetery, 19th century cemetery with beautiful walkways, beautiful vegetation, hills, and the stones are displayed in a certain way. It's quiet, it's peaceful. It's actually very beautiful and pleasant to be in. Whereas a burying ground is more almost like an artifact. It's almost like a historic artifact, although the stones do have beauty and great artistic value. That's basically the difference between both of them.
And what sets our old burial ground apart from others? What makes ours notable?
Well, it's one of the most significant burying grounds in this part of Massachusetts and probably the United States. It ranks as highly, I believe, as Burial Hill in Plymouth, Duxbury burying grounds, the burying ground in Plimpton. We have extraordinary stones there. Both historic and artistic. One of the great features is that we have possibly 150 or so stones or tombstones of grandchildren of pilgrims, and I'm just trying to uncover that right now. And well, you know, I can continue to rhapsodize if you want me to.
I mean, if you have, any notable residents who are buried there.
Oh yeah, we certainly do. The first burial there was Charles Little. He was only 4 months old. He was buried there in 1717. And the next image that I want to show you is one of Major John Bradford. And residents here in town will know that name because the Major John Bradford House, located down Landing Road, is the headquarters to the Jones River Village Historical Society. And Major John was the grandson of Governor William Bradford. He died there in 1736. He did so much for the town. He was the founder of Kingston. He was a principal landowner. He was a wealthy man. And for all that he did for the town and his historic significance, upon his tombstone, it says that he lived near 62 years with his wife. That was the important thing to him. the value of family and of marriage. And I think this kind of information that we get from the stones is so valuable because it's a real insight into how people lived. Reverend John Stacy is buried there. He was the first minister of the First Parish Church in Kingston. Peculiarly enough, his stone is written in Latin. And when I first saw it, I went, who is this guy and what's this Latin? Well, he was the first minister. He was educated at Harvard College at that time. He was the most educated man in town, apparently. I look back at the curriculum of Harvard at the time, and it was quite extensive. And it basically just gives information about him and what he did and how long he lived and who he was married to. Another interesting stone I wanted you to take a look at would be, in contrast to Major John Bradford, would be the stone of the Cushman children. Now, on the top of a gravestone is a thing called the tympanum, and there were 4 little death heads there, little skulls on top. And I looked at it, I was astonished. There are 4 children there, buried in that place. They all died on the same day. And I went into the church records, and they all died of a throat ailment. And to think of the horror that must have been. Again, I looked through the statistics. The statistics show that about 25% of the burials in the old burying ground were of children under the age of 10. That's 1 out of every 4 deaths in town. And again, that tells you a little bit about what life was like in colonial Kingston. In contrast, again, Ebenezer Cobb, buried nearby, lived to be 107 years of age. He was the man who would not die. His minister, Zephaniah Willis, came to him in his 90s and asked him if he was ready to make his peace with God. He said, "I have no intention of dying." And he said, "How can you say that?" He said, "Well, I don't want to go to that burying ground and have some animal dig me up at night." And so Zephaniah Willis went to the town and said, "We must enclose the burying ground." And they did. And it's true. And on the south and east side of the burying ground, they built a large stone wall. The west and north sides already had fencing. So Ebenezer decided to go on a few more years and died at age 107. He almost made it to 108 years of age.
Now, is he one of the, I know we have had a handful of residents over the years that actually lived during 3 different centuries. Is he one of them?
That was Ebenezer Cobb.
Okay.
He lived in the 17th, 18th, and 19th century. He was born in 1694. He actually knew a pilgrim, Peregrine White. He knew Peregrine White, or knew him, at least spoke to him. He was a boy when I think he was 7 when Peregrine White died. And yeah, there was one other resident of Kingston who lived through 3 different centuries. That was Lois Lawrence, but she died recently in the year 2000. Again, I don't want to take too much time, but there was this, can I speak of one other individual? Sure. And I have a couple of photographs for you to take a look at. The memorial to John Thomas, General John Thomas, friend of Washington, a physician, a veteran of the French and Indian War. He was in charge of building the battlements on Dorchester Heights in 1776, March of 1776. Over 1,000 men and I think 320 teams of oxen dragged up cannons from Fort Ticonderoga in one night, set up these cannons, trained them down on Boston Harbor, where the British had their navy, or that part of their navy anyway, and the British left shortly thereafter. Also buried, by the way, in this particular site, is his wife, Hannah Thomas, who was the first female lighthouse keeper in America, which is a distinction.
Gurnett Light.
Gurnett, right, it was Gurnett Light, yes. And also Zephaniah Willis, who was quite a character, historian, minister, politician, census taker, and he served the town for over 60 years. And there is yet another photograph of the grave before restoration and then after restoration, which you can see. But I think Ken has more information about the burial ground.
Yeah, I can segue from there to...
Before we do,
go ahead,
I was just going to say on that too, that the restoration of that gravesite was done by the Bug Island Preservation Group.
Yeah.
And with a preservationist that's trained in that type of thing. So we just don't go over and scrub graves. This was done professionally.
Oh, yes.
And you can see the difference in those pictures. We do want to mention too that there have been other research done on there, before we segue into your thing, about the Girl Scout troop.
Oh,
right?
yes. Yeah.
That did work, and the number was, we're trying to remember,
8234.
The Girl Scout troop there.
Yep.
They did work on and presented a booklet to the town on the Revolutionary War soldiers that are buried there.
Yep.
And we've had other scout work done too, life projects as well.
Yep.
In there. So we want to thank those people for their work and working with us, but we don't want people going in there with wire brushes and cleaning things. And that's what this whole project that the town granted CPA money to us was for. They granted us this so we could have a master plan for the old burying ground prepared. That's almost completed now. With Martha Lyons, she's from out in Western Mass, and her company have gone in and surveyed all the graves, all the tombstones, and they've looked at the landscaping, and they're coming back to the town with the recommendations for us. Was that what you were going to talk about? I hope not.
That's where we're heading, but yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I did want to put in a plug for those guys and the work that was done there.
Yeah,
So, sorry, Ken.
A lot happening now between everything you mentioned and from the Scouts helping out to the Preservation Master Plan. There'll be a public announcement or public presentation on that sometime in May, so it's just about done. One of our roles as a Historic Commission is to help shepherd this review, and you may say, okay, what's a Preservation Master Plan? The point is that besides safeguarding or preserving this important historic research, all the things that are embedded in there, the stories, the families, the Mayflower descendants like Tom spoke of, also is the opportunities going ahead to improve public access into the burial ground so people can appreciate it in different ways. One way is to teach the upcoming generations, like the first graders who are coming in there this spring. Will be all kinds of better opportunities for them. Also for people just to take a walk through. One of the proposals coming out of the plan is just to, and Tom referenced this, but to open it up to some of the traditional views, and that they assess things like the trees. There's 19 trees that are dead or dying that really need to go very soon, others to monitor, and to open it up. Looking forward as well, one idea is to create a new loop or a path, and this would be on the east side of the church, close to the town green, and so people can just wind their way through in a new way and see more, and also add a couple of interpretive signs for some heritage detail, educational detail we could read about on the way through. So also a couple of keynote highlights of the assessments for the gravestones and monuments themselves, the conservation for those. There's about 660 of them, I believe, that are identified as needing that. And what the consultant will help us do in the report is that they've just laid out a series of projects to help the town prioritize what we can do. Of course, we can't throw a huge bundle of money to get it all done at once, but hopefully to phase through what people feel are most important. And I'd like to highlight this in terms of looking to the future for the burial ground, is that there's a small veterans cemetery that may not be that well known on the west side of it. And Tom, correct me if I'm wrong, I think there's 9 plots there
There are 9,
now.
yeah.
Well, looking at that more closely, there's a number of ways that that area could be reshaped and expanded with room for perhaps 100 more plots. So we're thinking as a commission, we'd be proud to help facilitate with the veterans agent, with veterans groups in town, with family members, families with members in active duty service and loved ones who have passed with that. A way to, there'll be a lot of ideas, I think, coming up through the community for, how could we repurpose, expand the Veterans Memorial, maybe even have a new central memorial there at some point. So it's a real opportunity for the town to come together on this. So that's one thing to look forward. Last thing maybe for me is that in general with the commission, we're looking ahead to 2026 and the town's 300th anniversary, of course. That may seem 6 years away may seem a lot to people, but we all know that'll go quickly. So by starting to improve and preserve the access and historic nature of the old burial ground, that's going to open up to celebrating the town's history. And I know Tom, tied in with Plymouth's 400 celebration this year, is going to be leading some tours of like the Pilgrim, the Mayflower descendants, as he spoke of. So there's a lot of opportunities for people to get involved.
Now, we have a couple of minutes left, so I want to make sure we have a chance to talk about the ongoing Historic Home Plaque program. So what can you tell us about that?
Yeah, we're just really rolling it out, and there's this is kind of a model here, but what we have, so the idea is twofold. It's to encourage pride in our historic homes, and it's also to encourage residents to dig further into the historic nature of your house. The house needs to be 80 years old. There's no regulations or prohibitions for anyone as to how you should hang or drill your plaque into your home. However, what you do need to do is to confirm through the deed and title work, the trail of ownership for your house. And we have someone, one of our other members is willing to help people who need to do that, but of course you can do it on your own, online mostly. And a little step to send that information to the Historic Commission just to confirm that. But what we have are a half-inch sign. It's a composite, a plywood and something else. You can have 2 or 4 holes drilled, the town seal on it, and just here's an example at our house at 4 Elm Street, where we have Hope Floats Healing and Wellness Center. 1844 was where it was built, and the 2 names, the original owner and builder was an important minister for the first parish, Reverend Augustus Pope. However, it's really known as the Edward Holmes House, as it was 5 generations there, and Edward lived a lot of his life there. So we chose to designate both lines or both owners the Pope Holmes House. But we're more than happy to help any homeowner with that process, and we'll be kicking that out, get some more publicity soon on that.
And certainly, once the program's ready to go live, if you guys want to come to a Selectmen's meeting and introduce it, that might be another great opportunity. Yeah. Just one final question. If folks are at home watching and they want to get involved, they want to take part in an event, or they want to learn more about the sign program, what can they do?
On our website, I guess, there's information.
Well, it's on there. They can email us at khc@kingstonmass.org. They can attend one of our meetings, which we meet every second Wednesday of the month as well. So, and stay tuned in the papers. Read the papers and the Kingston Reporter, and we'll have plan to have articles in that coming up, as well as other events that we're planning for.
Great.
And I should note that I never realized it, but I just realized at a conference I was at, they mentioned that our tricentennial, right, is the nation's semi-quincentennial. It's the same year.
Yes,
So, yeah, so we might be able to tie in with some national events. You never know.
Good time.
So, yeah, I would recommend them to keep in touch and drop by. We're still looking for a new member, so we have one opening right now on the commission, but we've got a pretty regular bunch otherwise. And so let us know. If the people want to volunteer for this commission or any other committees in town, there's volunteer forms at the Selectman's office or online. They can fill out and submit to the Selectman's office, but they should designate what committee or commission or group they want to belong to, otherwise they get put someplace else.
Great. Craig, Ken, Tom, thank you guys for coming out, and I look forward to having you on again.
All right.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us here.
Yep.
Yeah.